Cameras live.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Regional Services meeting of January 27th. I'd like to acknowledge we're on the ancestral territory of the Coast Salish peoples, snowy ancestral territories this morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Regional Services meeting of January 27th. I'd like to acknowledge we're on the ancestral. So a little feedback there. So our first item is approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Director Nicholson, second. Director Smith, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item M1 is the approval of the Regional Services Committee meeting minutes of November 25th, 2020.
Okay, motion to approve. Director Sebring, second. Thank you, Director Smith. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
No business arising from the minutes, so on to public input period. And I'm just calling up my email here. Sorry for... The first submission is from Cliff Evans. Chairperson, on today's agenda is R1, Report from Legislative Services Division. 2021 resolutions, the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. The AVICC is calling for possible resolutions for direction at their 2021 AGM. I think this would be a golden opportunity for the CVRD to put together a solid waste proposal for Vancouver Island. There's no way we should be shipping our solid waste to the USA for disposal. We've been shipping our waste off our island for decades at a horrendous cost. It's high time we change this and organize an environmentally acceptable way of remediating the solid waste on Vancouver Island. For decades, we've talked about doing this and nothing has happened. Each time the public has asked for a solution to our solid waste program, we get the old "we're studying it" answer. Here's the CVRD's chance to put a resolution together and submit it to the AVICC. Let's not miss this opportunity. No more excuses. The next submission is from Susan Kaufman. Good morning, Madam Chair. I'd like to speak to the following items. R5, Climate Change Adaptation and Risk Management, to encourage the committee support and adopt the recommendation of the report, that stormwater management and development standards be prioritized in the modernization phase of the HOCP for development guidelines to include reduction of tree removal and requirements for on-site stormwater drainage management. R6, Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program Proposal, Shawnigan Basin Society, encourage the committee support and adopt the recommendation of the report. The application meets the requirements and spirit of the DWPP program. The Basin Society has the capabilities of providing value-added technical support and research at minimal costs. And on R8, verbal report from the CAO, discussion of Select Committee Regional Parkland Acquisition Master Plan Review. Appropriate to hear from the CAO given the tumultuous discussion of the subject matter, and express again that verbal reports by senior management preclude providing information to the public and directors in a timely manner and do not allow the public to provide input prior to decision making. And that concludes public input period.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Legault, and thank you to the public for the input. Today, no delegations, no correspondence. So the next item is for information. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Correspondence from the Mayor of Municipality North Cowichan regarding the Chemainus River floodplain mapping.
Okay, any discussion? Director Sebring?
Yeah, just a very quick, I note this is on the agenda later on, and thank you very much for putting it on the agenda, and I trust that you'll be going ahead with this grant application. It's very important. We sent a letter to the province back, or I did on behalf of council back in June or July of last year, going, you know what, we got another flood season coming. This is urgent. We need to deal with it now. And here we are in the middle of another flood season and nothing's been done. So I'd really like to move this thing forward so that before we get to the next flood season, we're dealing with this gravel bar and the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sebring. Anyone else? Okay, so that was just for information. So we will move on to reports. Oh, sorry, Director Nicholson.
I'm just thinking it would be very useful to have maybe a workshop presentation on our whole regional flood management planning and strategies moving forward, because it's only going to get worse in the future. And I feel a little out of the loop at this point.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's any staff that would like to comment on that. Don't see Ms. Miller on the call yet. Okay, anyone else? No? Okay, we'll move on to reports then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R1, report from Legislative Services on resolutions to the 2021 AVICC. And this is for direction. If there's any areas where the committee would like to focus attention for a resolution, I will point out that we have received additional follow-up correspondence from AVICC encouraging local governments to focus on areas of very high priority and not to revisit items that have been previously dealt with by AVICC.
Thank you. So I have Director Morrison and Director Marsh and Director Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to provide a little bit more detail. The final process for debating and dealing with resolution hasn't been completely determined, but given the fact there will not be an in-person convention this year, there will likely be a form of a one-day convention workshop, but it's likely that AVICC will be embarking on a new innovative format for debate and discussion of resolutions, and that will, as I said, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but it is very likely that a list of resolutions received will be grouped and packaged and actually sent back to all of the member local governments, and so that there will be an opportunity for, and it's hoped that each local government will schedule a period of time in which the resolutions that make that list will be brought forward and debated and discussed at each individual council and board table, and that there will be votes taken and recorded and then sent back to AVICC for ultimately to go forward to UBCM. And it's making, I guess, lemonade out of lemons in the fact that it's very costly and very difficult to run live debate in an online format, and the added benefit to this approach is that it will actually put all of the resolutions that AVICC will be debating from all its member local governments in a public format, so that members of the public that are interested can see them on a published agenda and can tune in and watch the debate of directors as they consider the various items. So you can expect something like that will be coming forward in the very near future. I have a meeting on Friday where we will be likely finalizing the format for this. Once again, to echo what Ms. Lagoa said, it will likely be a condensed format of very specific and high priority items. And there's a lot of information that's been provided with this report, and individual directors and individual local governments can actually go online to the UBCM website to see what has been considered and submitted in previous years. And I will just make a quick comment about the public input that's been received. Mr. Carruthers mentioned earlier that we can do an in-depth discussion about how the CVRD solid waste program operates and runs and some of the specific details. But I can assure not only this committee but the public that are watching that the special committee on solid waste, which I believe Director Yanni DiNardo is our representative, has been doing absolutely stellar work on this. There's been a lot of data gathered and tracked, and that the issues like waste to energy and finding common landfill sites and the likes have been discussed at length, and a lot of good work has been done on that front. So I would suggest that a resolution coming forward from this group would be superfluous, really. There's a lot of great work that's already being done, and all options are being explored, including new technology and possibilities for our regional district participating and combining our total tonnage with others to make an efficient system if one's available. So on the resolutions, if you turn your minds to key newer priorities that maybe haven't been through AVICC and through to UBCM. Those are what the AVICC executive is asking that you put forward, because not only will there be sort of a truncated AVICC resolutions process and convention process, but it'll likely be the same for UBCM as well. So, and also keep in mind that any individual local government can forward a resolution through to UBCM. They just prefer that all of our area associations across the province review resolutions before they're sent through to them. So open to any questions. There's a lot of good information here, and if there's important items, I would suggest that we discuss them among ourselves and talk to staff about when they could be brought forward. They do have to be approved by the board. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Director Morrison, for the overview. Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And perhaps if this is not important enough, I didn't look at the list. Director Morrison could let me know, but I would like us to send a resolution asking the province to set the compensation levels for elected officials. I think a few times that we've gone over that here have been very awkward for people. And I just think that optically wise, it would be best if the province did do that rather than asking us to do it. So I'll just leave it to you. If you want a motion, I will move it. But what do you think, Ms. Director Morrison? Is that not an urgent enough item?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sorry.
I think today is not necessarily the day that we're seeking resolutions, because I think a little bit of work needs to be done. I know that there have been multiple resolutions sent through to UBCM on the compensation issue, and the UBCM has, I believe, done a special paper on it already. So that sort of thing could come from North Cowichan as a direct resolution through to UBCM. AVICC is looking for new, not previously explored items of priority for local government. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Thank you. So I believe we are looking for a recommendation at the end of the discussion, but I have Director Stone first.
Yeah, it was just Director Morrison covered it. It was more about that the solid waste issue has been well discussed and debated at AVICC, and it's ongoing. So putting forward plans or resolutions, I doubt would get accepted as resolutions because those have already been passed. And it was just looking at the committee minutes and all the work going back from 2015 to 2020, and just recognizing that dealing with solid waste is always a challenging issue, or we wouldn't be sending it to Rabanco. So on the compensation issue, yeah, I know that there have been resolutions in the past, and there is the searchable database there if folks are looking for it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, sorry, I see Alternate Director Duncan. I should have welcomed you to the meeting. Welcome, sir. So we will need Director Duncan.
Just a comment on wage levels or compensation levels. When we looked at the levels in Duncan, they hadn't been looked at for 14 years. So when we actually did the comparison to other same-sized communities, we were looking at a 30% increase. We brought that in over a 5-year period. So it takes a lot of work to try and get a province-wide compensation scale.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we, Director Morrison?
I think maybe just for ease of moving this forward, AVICC is suggesting that the elected officials work with their parliamentarians and corporate officers around the crafting of the resolution. So I just sort of on the fly, and sorry to put you on the spot, Ms. Legault, but would it be appropriate that any directors that have topics that they'd like to be explored, could they be either sent to you or to myself, and we could perhaps work together with the committee chairs to list and craft some of these resolutions?
That's quite fine.
So just general direction to staff. There's Mr. Crothers.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Yes, Mr. Crothers.
So I think just to maybe avoid some of the extra work, if any of the directors have ideas, if they could bring them forward and we could come back to the board on February the 10th and get consensus from the board that those are the items that you want to take forward. There's a fair bit of writing and research that has to go into these. And so I wouldn't want staff running off developing resolutions unless we have concurrence of the board that those are the topics. If we can get that agreement on the 10th of February, then that gives us 2 weeks for us to get those resolutions crafted, and we can bring them back to the board for approval on February 24th. So if I could just ask directors to have that to us as soon as possible so that we can get a list together, and we can do some vetting of those items prior to the 10th of February to determine if they have in fact been addressed in the past, that sort of thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So Director Toporowski, then Director Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a resolution that I'm looking at, and it's from Union of BC Indian Chiefs. So it's just something that I can't wrap my head around wordsmithing. So so it's just to send it to Angie. Is that correct, Ian or Ryan? The process of doing this.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that you send it to both Ms. Legault and myself so that we can work together on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Smith.
Thank you. I know that the staff is very conscientious and always working to strive to make our region better. And for all of us as directors, I think it's really important that we include the senior management team in any of these resolutions that are brought forward, or they may have some ideas. Mr. Crothers, has said that the staff could vet some of them and go through them. And as a director, I would really appreciate having some input from the staff also, because we may be missing something that they feel is really important. And I know that Mr. Crothers will bring those forward for us if we're missing them. So I appreciate some staff input on our resolutions so that we don't miss something at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, so Ms. Legault, I'm not clear. Do we need a recommendation for this, or?
No, we can move to the next item if the discussion's closed.
Okay, I believe so. Thank you. So the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R2 is a report from Parks and Trails on the 2020 Parks and Trails Visitation Summary, and this report's for information.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any presentation or comments on that? Okay, Director Stone.
Just an observation of the obviously usage is way up, but in a couple of cases there are some reductions in usage, and just with some familiarity with like Yellow Point Park, for example, I will say that it seems like there's a little bit of a maintenance gap. Like when we go to use Yellow Point Park, because it's in our area, it's often just really muddy and sort of unusable unless we want to bath the dog after. But I notice at other community parks, sort of that standard of maintenance seems to be at a higher level. Is that just due to the individual area parks budgets?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Stone, it's more to do with the level of the trail system, and in particular Yellow Point Park. historically has been more of a rustic experience for people. But we are working through with the new Parks Commission in Area H, along with the Director Department, in terms of opportunities there to deal with some of the muddier areas as well as some crossings there. So it all depends on the on basically the scale and the attributes of the park. Some are more nature and rustic orientated than others, and also depends on level of use.
Okay, thank you. And that's not a criticism, just an observation.
Thank you. So I have Directors Acton, Wilson, and Morrison, and Smith.
Well, I guess I was just going to ask if attachment A could be forwarded to myself at least. I don't know about other directors, but my copies all came out not recognizing the script by that presentation. So
Mr. Farquhar?
maybe maybe you could just forward it to me later. It'd be fine.
Mr. Chair, we will resend it out to all the committee members, and we'll forward as well to the commissions for their information.
Perfect.
And I just to add, I don't need to see the numbers. I know the community is really happy with the parks, and I'm getting constant feedback about all the improvements in Shawnigan Lake, about the new railway trail, and just people using Baldy for the first time. And right now, especially, that people really appreciate our parks. Thank you so much for all the work that you guys do.
Thank you. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Stone brings up an interesting point, and that is the cost of maintenance of these things, and it's something that I brought up before. I think the figure that I came up with the amount of money that Parks has and the available acreage, it works out something like just in the region of $3,000 per acre per year, which is a huge amount. I would like to see some of this money directed towards or some form of study which says, why are we spending so much per acre? I fully appreciate that a lot of it is in the back country, if you like, and it's more difficult to get to, but that shouldn't be the main reason. I would love to see the cost per acre per year brought down substantially.
Thank you. Mr. Farquhar, any comment on that, or? Let's see.
Mr. Chair, in general, budgets are established by the level of service in each electoral area based on the wishes, needs, and asks. And so certainly within our communities that have a lot more built infrastructure, there are more costs associated with maintenance. It's not per se a cost per acre. It's more associated with the level of built infrastructure like tennis courts, ball fields, picnic shelters, washroom buildings, and the like. So certainly if there was some interest from the committee, staff could endeavor to bring some information back. But at the end of the day, the costs really are associated with what's been developed over the years throughout the system of parks across electoral areas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A follow-up, please, on that.
Follow up.
Yeah, I appreciate that the level of service is a factor here, but the main point, as you know, that one of the figures that were brought forward previously shows that wages and benefits for this particular department far outweigh the actual operations cost. And that's what bothers me the most, that we're spending so much to pay people to do something. And I think it was something like a split of 60-30. Which goes between the wages and benefits and the actual work which is being done. And this is something which we need to look at and address.
Thank you, Director Wilson. So I have Directors Morrison, Smith, Duncan, and Stone. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, lots to talk about there, but I'll stick to the nature of the question that I had originally. Mr. Farquhar, I see the value in the year-over-year analysis of usage, and I know that this is a really big deal when we first acquired or purchased the first few counters, and we're putting them in, and it was wonderful new technology. But I'm looking at this, and I think in the entire western region of the regional district, there is perhaps the Cowichan Valley Trail and Arbutus Park, the only two parks out of all of the holdings out here that have any data on them. So my question is it going to be a requirement of the, Area F parks to request that a counter be purchased from our specific community budget for so that we can begin analysis of usage in our community parks? Because it would be nice to have those numbers. This is it's a fulsome report, but it's really an incomplete picture of our regional usage.
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, through Director Morrison, some good news for 2021. We have implemented 2 counters out in the Western communities. We are now going to be tracking use at Lily Beach Park in Area F and on Bald Mountain Community Park in Area I. So we're wanting to continue to expand the opportunity to track use. One of the things that we look at is the type of park and the ability to put in a counter that will ideally capture the majority of users. So we're getting a fair picture of what that level of use is. So those are the 2 parks that have come on stream for 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. Director Smith.
Thank you. I was interested to hear Director Stone's comments about mud. We've had one trail that's definitely major mud, and then a couple of other ones. I'm working to address them and financial prudent direction. And I know Mr. Farquhar is helping and making sure that we're trying to delete the tripping hazards on some of the trails and deal with some of the mud that's up to people's knees in some areas. So, as an elected official for an electoral area, we are a small area, and we have massive amount of parkland that we have to maintain. So we are working through it. We have sub-regional parks and we have regional parks also. And I think that with the COVID, there's such heavy use. I know the other day I went through Stocking Creek Park. Our parking lot had not only the parking lot full, but the driveway all the way in with 21 cars. Finch Place had another 20 cars. North Watts Road was covered with cars. So we have this huge usage that's going on within our parks that are community parks that are taking extra beating basically. And so these are things that need to be worked out, and I appreciate all the help that comes from staff as we kind of work our way through them. One of the things about the Saltaire section of the Cowichan Valley Trail, the stats are a little bit off because the trail between Stocking Creek and Chemainus didn't open until the 26th of April 2019. So the increase is a little bit skewed there, but 87% increase is definitely a lot. I'd like to thank all the staff and all their work that they do towards our parks, but I think that we also have to step up to the plate and look at, as directors, how we can fund some of these additional maintenance projects as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. Director Duncan. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being Scottish, I'm definitely conscious of costs, but there's one thing that I haven't heard mentioned very much is safety. And safety is a prime concern when we're opening parks to the public. So, I don't want to be pound foolish and penny wise, or penny wise and pound foolish. I think we have to make sure that we fund the department properly to make sure that maintenance and safety are considered all the time.
Thank you. So I have Director Stone, Marsh, and Kuhn. Director Stone.
It was asked and answered. It was more about Director Morrison already asked it about additional counters coming online. Thanks.
Thank you. So Director Marsh.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've got some trouble with my second computer, so the chart has disappeared, but I noticed from the period between 2019 to 2020, there was only 2 parks that had decreasing use. And I don't remember the park, but I do remember the number that had 165% increase in use. And I suspect that no matter what happens with COVID, people are you know, once you've been out there and feel how good it feels to be moving, that they're going to continue to be used. And, you know, that does cost maintenance. And I think, you know, I think the thing that I find most challenging is to try and get across to the public. So I hope we would look at this, that as local government, like, we're not selling anything. So we don't make a profit. We're providing a service almost in everything that we offer. And so I would imagine it's fairly demoralizing. I would be completely demoralized if at every other meeting or every budget meeting, it was pointed out that most of the cost is staffing cost. Well, you know, how could it be anything else when we're providing a service? We're not selling widgets, we're not selling cars, we're not selling houses, we're providing services. And I would say if any directors no longer want to provide that service, I would assume that it's their business and they could suggest they'd like to close that park.
Okay, thank you. So last speaker on my list is, not anymore. Last speaker, Director Kuhn, then Director Wilson.
Yes, I would just like to make a point. I'd like to get to back to what Director Smith talked about. There seems to be a tendency now that individual problems in certain areas get dealt with at the board level or committee levels. And I just don't think that is right. If there's a problem with the park, if I have a problem in my park, I'll talk to parks and I'll try to get it sorted out. And I don't bring it up at a board or at a committee level where everybody is involved, and it's a total waste of time as far as I'm concerned. We should not be dealing with individual problems in individual areas. That's up to the area director to do that with the departments. And I don't think that should concern all of us. So I'm really against that. Thank you.
Thank you. So Director Wilson to close, please.
I'll pass this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Director McGonigal.
Thank you. First of all, you're doing a great job, Mr. Chair, at trying to get us moving along. But I think what we have seen, not only in the community parks and regionally, is after the shelter-in-place order was lifted, even in municipalities, we saw a huge influx of people looking for opportunities to recreate. We saw similar numbers increase within the parks, within the boundaries of the town of Lake Cowichan, for instance, and the usage and the maintenance costs that go along with that, which were incorporated into those visitations, whether it be garbage collection, security, or whatever maintenance problems that did occur. So the numbers that are within the regional count also pertain to the municipalities. So it's a regional entity, not within just community parks.
Thank you. And Director Nicholson.
Thank you. First, a question to Mr. Farquhar, if I may. How many of our parks have park management plans?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, offhand, we only have a few management plans in place, park management plans. We do have a regional parks and trails master plan, and we do have parks and trails master plans for 5 electoral areas in place, electoral areas A, B, C, D, and E. But currently, in terms of individual park management plans, we do have one for Bright Angel Park. We have developed a park concept for Elsie Miles, and I know that we have identified proceeding forward with one for Yellow Point Park because of a lease renewal coming up with the province in a couple of years. So position yourselves for that one. But across our spectrum of parks, we do not have a park management plan for each and every park. No.
Follow up.
So my point is that the pressures on our parks are only going to increase with increasing people moving to the valley, increasing population, and with increasing stress as a result of climate change. So we really, if we want to continue to invest in our parks, which I believe we do, and if we want to keep our costs under control, I think it would be smart to be a little bit more proactive on developing park management plans. And I think that those are plans that should be done with the community, because typically the community knows the parks best, of the ones that they use. And there is a lot of talent out there in the naturalist stewardship community that could probably help a lot on figuring out the level of development that should happen in parks, because basically what's happened is it's just evolved over time. And I think that we need to be a little bit more thoughtful about it and proactive about it. So I think we should be investing in getting park management plans done so that we understand what the costs are going to be in the future and are assured that they're appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everyone for the discussion. That one was just for information, so I believe we can move on to the next item. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R3 is report from Environmental Services. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant application in the amount of $300,000 be submitted to the National Disaster Mitigation Program for the development of a decommissioning plan for the Yubo Dam.
Thank you. So I don't know if we have any comments from staff or discussion. Director Kuhn was first.
I move.
Second, Director Morrison. Okay, Director Morrison.
Thank you. I was going to ask the question before the resolution got put on the table because it's a little off topic to this, but is there any staff that might be able to answer if the Ashburnham Dam might be on a list for future consideration?
Any staff available to answer that one? Let's see, Mr. Hatami.
Mr. Hatami, yes.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Answer this question. Right now, we don't have a program, but we need to do some study because if we want to remove the Ashburnham Dam, is it going to be a benefit to us? Because the dam is fairly in a good shape, and we may be able to find some other options for that. But yeah, definitely in future, we need to do a study. And that study is similar to Yubo Dam, but again, Yubo Dam is in a bad shape. So that's the difference. So it's not it's in our list, but not immediately.
Any follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support the this application, and this is necessary, and I fully concur with what Dr. Hatami had said. Our dam on Ashburnham Creek shouldn't be going anywhere, but it's one of those that surprise, we're now responsible for it as of the downloading by the province of dams and other structures like that. So I want to see it addressed at some point, and just glad to hear that it's on a list and perhaps one day will be studied. So I support the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Smith. Your microphone, Director Smith.
Having a new laptop, sometimes the little arrow tends to make you all disappear when I touch the wrong thing. So welcome back, everyone. I support this resolution. I'm just, I know while Mr. Hatami's here that the Stocking Lake Dam is definitely an issue. And I know that he's working towards finding some solutions and possibilities for that dam, and that's appreciated. I know that we have some dams in our areas and they're all aging out. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Director Nicholson.
Thank you. When we were talking about flooding earlier, I noted a bit of impatience perhaps from Director Sebring about moving on flood issues in the Chemainus. And I am wondering, I guess, is how do we set priorities? I mean, this is obviously an important and needed project, but they're all important and needed. And I'm wondering how we decide with limited staff resources what happens in any particular year.
Thank you. Anyone want to hazard an answer?
If I may.
Okay. Ms. Miller.
Thank you. I can't seem to get the video to work today, but oh, there it is. Thank you. What we do is we base it on a risk prioritization. So we've done a scan of all of the floodplains and the flood areas and used a standardized risk methodology to prioritize how we move forward on those processes. Some of the initial investigations told us that the risk was not particularly high, or the products that we had in terms of information were appropriate at the time. Others identified deficits or risks. So that's how we're moving forward on this. So I hope that helps. So there was a study that was done and tabled to the board about 2.5 years ago that went through all of the floodplains as well as all of the dams and identified a list of priorities. And now as we're moving forward, we're using, where available, grant funding because some of these studies are fairly expensive, and certainly the decommissioning work will be quite expensive. So we're trying to use the money in a prioritized fashion to reduce the risk to the most percentage of the community possible.
Thank you. Okay, if Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just in response to Director Nicholson, I trust that wasn't a rhetorical question. It kind of sounded like it. I really appreciated staff's answer on this. The priority to me is the protection, first of all, people and then property. And this Chemainus thing, I mean, it was illustrated again a year ago in the flood. People were affected. There were people who were knocked out of their homes by the flooding last year who still are not back into those homes. And it's quite clear from sort of anecdotal observations that there are things that can be done to mitigate the risk. I've walked the river in that area. There's huge gravel bars there that have been building up over the years. We need that study to get that done. We need it primarily also as a courtesy to our Halalt neighbors, because they're the ones primarily impacted by this. But last year, for the first time, the highway flooded. I know we're on the next agenda item, but this goes to how we prioritize. When the north end of the Cowichan Valley is cut off from the south end of the Cowichan Valley, you couldn't get from Duncan to Chemainus during that flood because West Home Road was flooded and Crofton was flooded and the highway was flooded. That's a priority. That would just be my 2 bits worth. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would like to reassure Director Sebring that it was not a rhetorical question. I agree completely with what he just said. I was thinking more in terms of apples and oranges, dams versus floodplains kind of thing.
Thank you. I see Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the assistance of the committee, you've got an item that you're dealing with the Yubo Dam decommissioning. This item is next on your agenda. And so I would suggest that you close that one item and move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you. Good suggestion. So we have moved and seconded. If no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. So the next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R4, another report from the Environmental Services Division, and the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant application in the amount of $473,000 be submitted to the National Disaster Mitigation Program for updating flood mapping for the Chemainus River.
Thank you. Director Stone. Director Sebring?
I think I was just seconding Director Sebring's motion. Yeah.
Okay, so we had it moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Don't see any. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. So we'll move to the next item, Ms. McGill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R5, report from the Environmental Services Division on the climate change adaptation and risk management strategy, and the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that the CVRD climate change adaptation and risk management strategy be adopted, and 2, that staff form an interdisciplinary team to develop operational implementation plans to support the climate change adaptation and risk management strategy for committee review in 2021.
Yes, Director Stone.
Move the resolution.
Is that a second, Director Atkin? Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any
Question.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and I have Directors Acton, don't know who was first, Kuhn, Marsh, Nicholson, Wilson. Director Atkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, I feel like we went through we didn't even make any comments on the environmental budgets yesterday. So I'm wondering about this report and like, how is it going to be funded and how much have we put aside for it? And where do we find it in the budget?
Thank you. Anyone with an answer to that?
Through the chair to the director, the operationalization of the budget or the operationalization of the strategy is largely a staff-driven exercise. So the staff and the community have come together to develop the overall strategy. The reality is to say, okay, well, that's great. We now have a strategy. We've got sort of short and long-term objectives. How do we actually mesh that into the organization? What key steps do we need to take? When do they need to be taken? And what budget is required to do that? So that is largely a staff discussion, an internal discussion that will be coming back to this committee to say, based on the sort of the cross-organizational piece between the land use planning department, engineering, our partners at North Cowichan, the city of Duncan, Ladysmith, the town of Lake Cowichan, how are we going to operationalize this and what budget do we need to do that? That would come forward for the 2022 budget discussions. So the idea is that you would be approving staff time to be spent in these discussions to bring forward tactical recommendations for implementation. So there is minor budget set aside for group facilitation if we need that, but that's already inside of the environmental initiatives budget for the 2021 period.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. So I have Director Kuhn, please.
Yeah, I don't know about all of you. Have you read that report? It's 105 pages. Personally, I get frustrated with reports like that. There's so much detailed information, and much of the information that's in this particular report we've read before, because it's stuff that came up before in similar reports. And so now we are supposed to make decisions based on that information. I find it frustrating because I'd like to see something condensed where actually things are pointed out that really affect us in our decision-making process. You cannot expect us to make a decision based on a 105-page report. I don't think it works. I mean, what you'd have to do if you really get into this, you'd have to sit there and then take items out of this report, put them aside, and then try to make a decision based on a condensed form. And I find that whole process very frustrating. Maybe I'm not expert enough, I don't know, but I'm pretty good at reading stuff. But 105 pages is a lot of material to read, especially when some of it has been regurgitated from previous reports. So you have to kind of weed that out, and you're looking for the information that you actually need in order to come to a conclusion. And I would appreciate if staff did that. If staff came up with a condensed report and said, okay, here are the recommendations, and this is why. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I look at this not so much as a report as a document that will help to protect us. And I'm afraid I can't get it up. I'm having, again, trouble with my other, the iPad that I read. So I had some comments about some of the subjects in the 105 pages. One thing I do recall, and I wanted to mention, was that it will be reviewed annually. And I think what I appreciate about this document is that it's something that I hope will be easy for the thousands and thousands of people in the CVRD who are very concerned about the environment to download or look at or read on our website. And as Director Kuhn has mentioned, we've had reports all along on this, and I appreciate staff putting them all together in one place, because it would take me a heck of a long time to find any one individual report. And so it's just a somewhat different viewpoint, and I'm grateful to staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I have 2 points that I would like to mention. First, I think we've been discussing a lot about the importance of parkland acquisition. And I don't see anything. I kind of flipped through all the objectives and strategies and so forth, and I didn't see anything speaking specifically to the role that we could, it's a tool in our toolkit that we have on protecting parkland and natural areas, and providing a network of green space in our planning for our communities, because that's really important to protect and build riparian biodiversity corridors, linking ecologically and culturally important areas so that we can recreate but also mitigate the climate and development pressures the region's facing. We really need to get serious about doing that, and I didn't see that in this strategy. The second point that I'd like to make is one of the most important parts about a strategy is actually monitoring whether you're being really clear about the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and monitoring and adjusting the strategy so that you are continue to move towards achieving those outcomes. In the strategy, it acknowledges the need to create indicators to monitor. Often with these kinds of plans, this kind of work doesn't happen, and so you're never really sure whether the things that you are investing in are doing what you intend them to do, and you're not really sure whether you're making any progress towards the outcomes. So I think that's a high priority in this strategy, and I hope it is not forgotten.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. I have Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of good points made here. The main point, of course, is the one made by Director Kuhn, that the actual volume of this report, having been presented, I think, on Friday with the agenda, has given us very, very little time to actually look at again. And I don't know about anybody else here, but I don't have a photographic memory to be able to go back and say, yeah, I read that report, because I don't, and nobody else does. And I have not had the time to digest anything that is in here, given that the last 2 days have been spent in budget meetings anyway. So I would like to take some of the time to review this report. Director Acton also makes a point of funding. which again is not brought forward here. And much as one of the responses I think was that this has been staff driven, and much as I appreciate staff being proactive, there should be something in here which says if we do this, this is what it will cost, as opposed to here's a report, make your minds up. So the financials implications to this have not been made clear. I would very much appreciate more time to read and digest what this report says, so that I have a much clearer picture going forward. This is we can't make a decision this quickly, given the amount of information that's held here. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stone.
Yeah, I read it, and there was the first 49 pages in completion. The last appendices were more practical actions that could be undertaken, which I think was laid out quite well. Obviously, most of it harkens back to previous reports. This is more of a summary of previous reports. So I think the base knowledge from my experience, obviously it's my second term on the board, so maybe I have more recollection of previous conversations that are summarized in this report. But in all of the reading that we had to do since the agenda was posted, this wasn't the heaviest. It was actually about a 45-minute read for those 49 pages. They're not overly dense. They're very simple. I see it differently. The only comment I would make about the time is that if this moves forward from the committee today, it'll come back to the board as a recommendation on February 10th, which should give everybody 2 weeks to be able to read through that information and bring any items forward. So I'm happy to support the resolution.
Thank you. That's helpful. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too, would echo some of what's been said so far. And I just want to bring to light, and I'm not sure that this is necessarily a COVID related thing. It's stated in the report that this is mainly a staff driven exercise, and it's important work. But I'd have to say that especially in the last year or so, I'm finding a high degree of being disconnected from a lot of the activities of our organization, and this is an example of good work being done, and my only exposure to it is a report that we have to read in a pretty condensed time frame in order to get to making decisions. So in some sense, it's our role as governors to be a decision-making body, but I'm finding that I'm more often finding myself unawares of a lot of what is going on within our regional district. And this is another example. I remember when the climate change report came out a number of years ago in the regards to temperatures and rainfall and the likes. That was a really important document that I gleaned a lot from, and there seemed to be a lot more discussion about it at the board. And if I was approached by someone on the street who had questions about it, it was easily answered. But I'm finding that I'm a lot more. I seem to be caught unawares of a lot of the initiatives that are going on, and I don't know whether that's a function of COVID or not. But when it comes to an exercise like this, is there any consideration to have a member of the board be part of this exercise, or to be a liaison? Because it just seems like we're downloaded a bunch of information, we process it over a weekend, we address it on the Wednesday, and we don't see it again until the review comes a year later. So I don't know if there's an answer to that question, and I don't know if there's other directors that are feeling that same disconnect that I feel, but I think I'd like to see more in the way of a connectedness, so that this actually has application to us when we're out in our communities, when we're talking to people, when we're interacting with people, because this is the work of our organization, and that what our taxpayers are paying for, and as elected officials we should have a pretty good grasp of it. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. I see Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate the comments. You know, we have a lot of work underway, a lot of work. Our staff are immersed in a number of different initiatives. Clearly, this particular report in front of you addresses 2 of your strategic planning objectives that were just recently approved. I'm not sure how to overcome that. This is a technical exercise, and I think having one director appointed, I'm not sure how much value that would have. I think what it comes down to is how we deliver these reports. I think staff are challenged because we hear regularly that the board and the directors are challenged with these long meetings and the amount of time that we're spending on Zoom. So it isn't really an opportune time for us to be having additional workshops on these matters. However, on something like this, if the board or the committee wanted to have a workshop where they could delve into a report like this in a little more detail, we can certainly do that. I appreciate there's a lot of information in here. It's not new information. This information has been brought forward on a number of occasions to the board in different formats and different, you know, it's a progression of work. And really this is about saying, here's the work that has been done, approve it, but then really the work comes in operationalizing it and working with the different jurisdictions. So I would suggest that if the committee is so inclined, staff would be happy to schedule a workshop where we could sit and answer questions in a little bit more detail if there's any questions that people have on this.
Thank you, Mr. Crothers. So I have Directors Marsh and then Sebring.
I don't have an objection, except for my body doesn't really like sitting that long, to have a workshop if that's what the majority of the board feels they need. I don't feel I need a workshop. Perhaps it's because the environment has been one of my greatest interests in the 7 or so years I've been on this board. And I'm not sure I agree with some of the comments that there's no metrics and no evaluation. Maybe it hasn't been built yet, but it's clear when you read the whole report that that's a part of the plan. And I would kind of like to see, actually, you know, I mean, I'll go along with the majority, but I would kind of like to let the staff fly instead of picking apart everything that it seems like, and I'm exaggerating, that comes before us and then having to just keep digging in, and then we make a decision. And like the Parklands Acquisition Fund, I'll just speak it out loud because it's on everyone's mind. 3, 4, 5 times we make the decision and it moves all over the place. And to me, that is a waste of staff time and board time. So, you know, whatever the majority goes with, I'll show up if there's one, but I won't vote for one. I think it's very well written strategy, and basically they're asking, do you want us to go ahead with this? Because this is what you said at your strategic planning meeting that you wanted. And so that's our decision. And, you know, if we've forgotten that we've said all this, well, that's on each individual. And in terms of a page of a report of this long, I mean, my goodness, at North Cowichan, regularly 400 to 600 pages we read before a meeting. So to me, this was actually quite a delightful read and a hopeful read. And I just would like to see us be more positive, not only with each other, but with our staff and with our community, because these are rough times and we need to stick together. We're not going to get through these next 40 years. Some of us I won't even be here in 40 years, but we're not going to get through these rough times if we pick apart everything that comes to us. Like, it's just like, I find it depressing, quite frankly.
Well, thank you, Director Marsh. Two more directors, Sebring and Martman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would concur with a lot of what Councillor Marsh said, actually. I'll definitely be supporting this. You know, we mandate staff to produce reports, and then we criticize them because they're producing reports that are too long. The timing on this one, and frankly, the timing on the housing needs assessment that's coming to the board later today, is a bit unfortunate given the week that we're in with the 2 budget meetings we had. But this is what we're elected to do, is to look at these reports. I'm quite taken with the notion of adaptation and mitigation. You know me, I have my concerns about the notion that we're going to save the world here in the CVRD or in North Cowichan when Canada produces 1.5% of all the world's GHG emissions. You know, how much impact are we going to have here? But equally, you know, energy efficiency and renewable energy and sustainable transportation and urban forest and community are all things I can support for perhaps different reasons than some of you. And the adaptation piece, absolutely. I mean, we just got through applying for a grant for a study on the Chemainus River floodplain because there are issues related to climate change that tie to that. Anyway, turn my phone. So I would just say, yes, I'll be supporting this, and with all due respect, I think we should all put our big guy pants on and read these reports and deal with them. It's what we're elected to do. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think Director Martman, and then we'll see if there's consensus on the idea of a workshop or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, since we have a resolution on the floor, I'm speaking to the resolution, and I'm in favor of this, but I'm also in favor of a workshop, being the last guy to the table in terms of understanding what's gone before. But this is an important document to me because I read the projection document and I see this as a progression of work being done regarding climate change and climate change action. And at what point does this go forward to the public? Because I think this is an important document, and do those workshops go out so that we can have the public at least see what the work's being done? So that would be my question before the question.
Okay, I have Director Smith.
Thank you.
Has the question been answered? Point of order. Didn't Director Martman have a question?
I did.
Okay, sorry, Director Martman. Was that a staff question?
I can certainly address the question through the chair to the director. The process so far has included a fairly substantial amount of public input, both with children throughout the region through the school district, as well as social service agencies and others involved in terms of dealing with the effects of climate change, as well as our other local government partners, including in some cases many of the directors at this table. And so our hope is that we would be tabling this report and we would then take it out to the community. What we're asking for in the second part of the recommendation is approval and direction for staff to work together in a cross-cutting mechanism across the local governments to come forward with recommendations about how we implement this. That also includes discussions with our community partners about how they are going to partner with us in terms of the implementation. So it's a cohesive process moving forward. And I think the reality is that quite often we have these strategies, they've got large objectives, desired outputs, but it really comes down to the brass tacks about who's going to do it, who's going to lead, where are the resources coming from, and what's the sequencing and timeline. And that's the process that we're going to be coming forward. So I think that's probably a very important time in the delivery of the recommendations about how we implement this, to have a workshop for input with the directors in terms of how we actually put it on the ground. So I hope that answers your question.
That's helpful. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Just a follow up.
Yes.
And I appreciate that, and I understand the input part, I believe, but I guess what I'm looking for, are you looking then to be doing that this year in terms of, because one of the things I've learned about strategies about community engagements over time is that you implement it in a very organized way to educate the public. And to me, this is a great educational document. And I will share it, as best I can within my area. but having a workshop coming out from the CVRD, just saying, hey, this is the work we've done. You feel as a director that something's been dropped on you. I think as a public, they're even further, arm's length from it. And so that's why I was just suggesting or putting forward about the timelines on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, more specifically to Director Martin's question, we have had workshops for the board and for committees in the past, and if they're of a general nature, we have allowed the public to attend those workshops. It could be set up as a special regional services committee with the only agenda item to be a workshop that would allow a presentation and an opportunity for directors to ask questions, and then the public has the benefit of that conversation as well.
Thank you. So I think Director Smith to close, please.
Thank you. Just to let you know, I did put on my big girl pants and I read all the documents involving all the things. They are getting a little stretched as we all sit here over time, but this is part of our job. And I appreciate everyone who does actually read all the documents and come prepared to the meetings. The thing is that I feel that this is one of the most important documents that we're looking at over this time frame, and we need to take a step back. And I would support having a refresher for us from staff to go over this document and to go over their recommendations, just so that we're more prepared. Receiving a document, reading the document is great, and I appreciate all the work and effort that's gone into the documents. The department has definitely a workload that keeps getting added to by us as directors, but I won't support this recommendation at this time. I would support a workshop for all of us as directors. It would give an opportunity for a new director to attend. Not all of us have sat and have knowledge from the past 7 years, 10 years, whatever. So I think it's a balance for bringing us all back together to sit down and go over some of these parts in the document and having a fulsome discussion. And then we'll be prepared for this to be out into the community in a better direction from all of us having that knowledge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Smith. So I think we have consensus on the workshop, I would declare. It is getting to be time for a break, so we have a motion moved and seconded. Does anyone need to hear the motion? I think we're okay, so I'd like to call the question, please. All in favor? Opposed? Director Smith and Wilson opposed? Director Nicholson as well? Motion carries. Thank you. Let's have okay, we've got a couple of people who want to jump in before the recess. Director Stone.
I think that there was some appetite for a workshop for the board on this developing item. Do we want to do a motion for that, or will staff take it under? Okay.
No, I think we should do
I would move that a workshop be arranged for the board to review I'm just going to get the right name here, the climate change adaptation and risk management strategy.
Thank you. Second by Director Yanni DiNardo. Okay, let's see. I think we can move straight to calling the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Director Seaver.
I think he was just opposed, Mr. Chair.
I was just opposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Marsh, is it important before the break, or sorry I missed you there?
I'll be as quick as possible, Chair. When someone says that Canada is only responsible for a very small amount of the emissions, it's just another example of how we look at things, because if you look at that holistically, that's true. But if you look at that per capita, we are, I think, in the top 3, if not the top 2 emitters per capita. And so I guess I just want to say my hope, and I don't know how we would ever affect this because we have trouble enough affecting what we're responsible for. But my hope is that the world would become united and they would say, yeah, we got to transition off oil. Let's use the clean oil that comes out that needs the least changing, and we need to get more forests. So let's plant in countries like Canada that have a lot of bare land and can do it. And so I just think it's important not to forget that even though we might not as a country be a huge emitter, per capita, we are one of the biggest. And that is a fact that you can look up.
Okay, thank you, Director Marshall. Okay, we'll have a 10-minute break back at 11 a.m. Thank you.
Cameras live.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I believe we're now in report number R6. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Report from the Environmental Services Division on the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program proposal from Shawnigan Basin Society. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the proposal received from the Shawnigan Basin Society be accepted as meeting the requirements of the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Partnership Policy, that staff develop a partnership agreement with the Shawnigan Basin Society for implementation of the proposed activities, and 3, that the proposal and agreement be referred to the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Technical Advisory Committee for information at its inaugural meeting in 2021.
Thank you. Some discussion, Director Stone.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the resolution. I just had a question that once that partnership agreement is drafted, would that come back to the board for approval or review, or would it just be, would this be passing that off to staff to execute?
Mr. Crothers.
Yeah, I've got Ms. Miller is going to respond to that. I'm going to assume that it's going to come back to the board. This is direction to develop that agreement, but I would have to consult with staff with regard to our delegation bylaw and whether the chair can simply sign it. And certainly if the committee wants to see it come back, that can be a request as well.
Thank you. I think I saw Ms. Miller.
Thank you. At this point, sorry, contrary to Mr. Carruthers, we were anticipating that it would be an operational agreement for the provision of services that are outlined in the application itself. So this is the board's opportunity to review it. It falls under the purchasing agreement values, so it would either be operational at the divisional level or at the general manager level for the detailed contract itself, as opposed to bringing that back to the board, which is simply an administrative activity.
Okay, follow up, Director Stone.
Yeah, so I guess the reason being is that in the financial considerations, I know we only have a limited budget within the function for these partnership activities. And I just was curious as to what was anticipated to be left for other potential partners in other parts of the region to perform partnership type work. So without knowing the number that's being utilized out of that sort of segmented budget for these partnerships, it was just unclear as to if there's room left in the budget for other partnerships of this type.
So there is, when the budget was initially put forward, it was anticipated that we would simply have one application coming forward under that bundle. With this application, we now have 2. We're in process in terms of working out the details with the Cowichan Watershed Board with their application for partnership. The budget for this would be coming from the watershed development portion. And so it is not competing with the money that has been set aside already for that other partnership, although it has and completed.
Thank you. That clears it up for me. I'd move the resolution that's been recommended.
Okay, seconded by Director Morrison, and I think I have Director Atkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I lost the spot where, so I noticed that this year we had 60,000 for strategic partners. I just wanted to make sure that, and this year it's only 50, so you're saying that it wouldn't come out of that anymore, so that 10,000 has been spent. Is that how they were funded for work that was just recently done?
Ms. Miller?
So we don't have a contribution agreement with the Shawnigan Basin Society. I believe you funded that through a grant and aid. So that doesn't come out of this program. For 2021, the budget is for this partnership program is coming out of 2 line items within the drinking water budget. One is the development of watershed management plans, because that is basically the background to this application, and the other is for a portion of the water quality work. So the funding is coming from 2 line items in the drinking water and watershed protection function for 2021. And as per the board's direction, this whole issue with regards to partnerships will be coming back for board direction for the 2022 budget as well. So for this year, we've got a nominal value attributed to it.
So follow up, please.
Yeah.
So I think it's good that we're formalizing this partnership, and I think it's great that Cliff and Bernie will be and Dave compensated for some of their volunteer time. But if we agree to this, does that mean we're agreeing to $50 an hour? I feel like other groups in the community might feel, volunteers feel a little, that seems to be quite a large sum. So are we agreeing to that at this time?
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. So they put together a proposal for us, which includes all of their internal costs. The nominal value per hour that they've attributed to it is $50 an hour, which is in line with what we would be paying other partners. The other value that they bring, which is part of the partnership piece, is that if you look at their deliverables, they're actually putting more time into providing us with those deliverables than the budget directly shows. So we are as taxpayers gaining from this partnership, ostensibly at a $50 an hour rate, but the level of their effort is anticipated to be much greater than that. So it's a partnership of 2 parts, if you will. It's got a good value statement, I think, is the bottom line.
And thank you. So I have Directors Morrison, then Yanni DiNardo. Director Morrison.
So I'm listening intently and trying to sort of create a flow chart in my mind here as to how this is working, and it's not getting any clearer. There's funding available from different lines within the function. Okay, I get that part. We are seeking strategic partnerships or various groups that can provide various services within the regional district, and so I'm reading this with the anticipation that this is a group that has their strategic partnership package ready to go and is submitted for approval and inclusion, and my understanding was that we're creating a stable of potential strategic partners that given whatever the particular project might be, would be easily transitioned into an agreement to provide a service. So I guess knowing that there's 2 different pots of money to come from, is there an expectation that we will have other groups that will be applying to be strategic partners to this function that are just getting into the stable and will be considered for other projects? Or is this going to be a one-on-one, you know, we've got something that we think fits into the guidelines of the drinking water watershed protection, and so we'd like to do this project, will it be funded? So can I get a little clarity, or are we going to have a stable of groups that will be sort of pre-approved that then staff can go to, or is it a project by project initiative?
Ms. Miller?
Thank you to the director through you. As per the policy that was brought to the board, we're anticipating that the program is really running in two ways. One is a fee for service. So if we need activities, we will put out a limited call for proposals, which would be open to local groups to apply. We know what we need. We've defined it. We're asking them if they want to provide a service. So that would happen throughout the year based on the work plan and the budget. There is one other option, which is the strategic partners piece, which the policy says just for our own sanity and financial planning purposes, that there will be an intake period once a year where partners can come forward to us and say, you know, this is slightly different than your work plan. We think that we are bringing good value, which supports the overall program. And they would put an application in, basically a proposal to us, work with staff to align it during one period as part of the CVRD's budget development process, so that we are allocating properly in terms of the long-term forecast for this particular program itself. It is not intended as an annual grant and aid or a grant giving process for other needs or other objectives. It must meet the objectives of the function as approved by the public and as outlined in the strategy that the board approved and the work plan that the board approved. So it's really about what they're bringing to the table to help the organization move forward. Once a year is the intake.
Thank you. So Director Yanni DiNardo?
Thank you. I'm just trying to refresh my memory. So this volunteer group, wasn't there a grant, and that's what you were talking about? There was a grant and aid, but that was 2020. They were given a grant and aid.
Ms. Miller?
So the Shawnigan group is quite interested in water quality and some of the issues with regards to contamination around the lake. We have a regional water quality strategy and a standardized process for that strategy in terms of where we test for water quality, how often we test for that. This group approached their local director, wanting to have funding for last year to do additional water quality work outside of our water quality strategy. So they had received funding, I believe, through the director. I'm not sure exactly how much funding they've received, but it's separate from what they're applying for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Marsh?
Yes, thank you. I was quite impressed with the Appendix 1, and I'll just highlight a few. There was 17 organizations that they have access to and are, working informally or formally with. And having UBC, the restoration programs with grad students, UVic, restoration and water quality programs in cooperation with graduates and professors. Also Mosaic is going to be, they're working on a long-term MOU with them to deliver awareness programs for forestry practices in local watersheds, which I think I hope is going to improve the forestry practices in the local watersheds, since they're going to be reporting on them. So, and then there's many other people, including a couple people sitting at this table. So I do support the recommendation.
Thank you, Director Marsh. I have Director Nicholson and then McGonigal.
Thank you. Just for the record, Bernie Yearlink just emailed us all, I believe, and the funding, the $50 an hour is not for volunteers. It's for technical expertise that they may have to hire, I suppose.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much. And I think we've had many presentations by this group through the years that I've been sitting on this board, with the expertise that resides within that society, and the acceptance that it meets the requirements within the strategies moving forward on the drinking water protection partnership policy. I'm excited to embrace the expertise within that group at perhaps helping with our own organization. It is a partnership, a once a year input, and I'm looking forward to working and seeing what the results will be. Even though it doesn't reside within my jurisdiction, I think it's an exciting project with the expertise that they do bring to the table that may have ongoing effects within my community. So I'm impressed.
Good, thank you. Any further discussion? So seeing no further discussion, it's been moved and seconded. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Director Kuhn? Motion carries.
Just allow me a comment. The reason I voted against this is because my area voted against the whole program when it came up for a referendum. So I pretty well have to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. So next item R7, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a report from the Finance Division on the Cowichan Housing Association Project Development Fund for Duncan Housing Society. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that $25,000 be allocated from the CVRD Housing Trust Fund for the proposed Duncan Housing Society's affordable housing redevelopment project for seniors in Duncan.
Thank you. Director Stone, are you moving that or moved? Seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Director Duncan?
Yes, I fully support this motion. You know, the Duncan Manors, really it's an end of life cycle. It's time to replace it. What we've seen so far from this group is going to be a good project, and I hope that you pass this for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Smith?
Thank you. Could staff just remind me on this topic, this group had received funding earlier of 25,000, and this is that project didn't pan out, and now this is an additional 25,000 for the same group. Can staff just remind me, refresh my memory on that, please?
Ms. Weiner?
To Director Smith. Yes, this is the same group. However, this one is now for pre-construction soft costs, and this was mentioned back when Mr. Horn came to the board earlier, I believe in December, and that was to request funding that would be utilized against other grant funding. So this is to come up with the pre-construction soft costs, and then that will be utilized to leverage some grant funding.
Thank you. Director Marsh?
Can I just have a follow-up?
Sorry, follow-up, Director Smith.
Just a follow-up. Do we have anything in our agreements that are indicating that if a group comes forward and their project is doesn't have the background to have the project go forward, and then they can reapply for a different project? Is there anything in our documentation for that situation?
Through the chair to Director Smith, no, there is not. At this point, all of these applications go in. They're reviewed by the Cowichan Housing Association and their board, and the application, if approved by their board, comes over to the CVRD's board for approval.
I'd just like to indicate that I do support this project. It's an amazing project. I'd love to see some seniors actually be accommodated. It's perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Marsh?
Yes, I had a long conversation about this with John Horn a couple months ago. And it was my understanding from him that it's not only for seniors, it also includes people who aren't seniors who might have disabilities and beyond disability. Has that changed, or is that just something that got not put in the report.
Anyone want to take that? Ms. Weiner?
Through the chair to Director Marsh. From my understanding, this has been, the information and all the background information is only discussing the seniors at this point in time. So the scope may have changed some, and that could be dependent on the grant funding. I don't know the specifics of that.
Okay, thank you. And then through you, if I may have a follow-up?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Weiner, is it still anticipated that the new structure will be built with the old structure still there with the people still being housed in it, or has that changed as well?
Unfortunately, I do not, through the chair to Director Marsh, I don't know the full scope of the project. I can just look at what's been given to me, and on that I'm saying it's an additional 151 units of affordable housing. So it's not saying anything about what's currently there, it's saying for an additional 151.
Okay, great, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Director Stone.
Sorry, pushing wrong buttons here. Yeah, these project development funds are often used to determine a lot of that scope and the likelihood of success. So I think that what comes out of this funding is actually a more complete full project view that's ready for moving toward actually, sort of getting funded and construction. So I think a lot of the questions that I'm hearing will probably be answered as a result of the work that comes from this funding.
Good. Okay, thank you, everyone. Seeing no further discussion, it's been moved and seconded. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you. So now to R8. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A verbal report from the CAO with discussion on a select committee for regional parkland acquisition master plan review.
Thank you. I see Director Stone.
I was just going to I just wanted to get on the speakers list. Thanks.
Okay. Shall we go to Mr. Carruthers?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So contrary to the listing on the agenda, I do not have a verbal report per se. This was a referral from one of your previous conversations to this committee, and this is how we got it on the agenda for you to have a conversation. So I do have some thoughts to support the committee around how you might want to undertake establishment of a select committee to deal with this, but I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, to hear what directors have to say.
Okay, thank you, Director Stone.
So I understood, and just speaking to the public input, the reason there's no information here is it was kind of a blank referral to the committee. So based on past practice, I think it would be good for us to look at people who would like to volunteer for this committee and then get that select committee set up. And I don't know if those hands were volunteers, but get this committee set up, and then that's where we can do the work to bring the parameters around the terms of reference back to the committee for adoption, and then that committee's work can move forward. And I just want to reflect on some of the conversations throughout today's agenda, really refer to the discussions I think that need to happen at this committee, which talks about the maintenance costs of the parklands that we have in the acquisition of new lands, and what the determination and parameters around those acquisitions might be, and how we look at the ongoing costs of the acquisitions that we have, as well as some of our existing parkland when we make decisions regarding future parkland acquisition. So in an effort not to sort of dive into the specifics, I would recommend that we really focus on those who would like to be part of the committee, and then task that committee with their first agenda item being to work on the terms of reference to bring back to regional services for adoption, and then we can execute that work. So that's just my suggestion, and I would volunteer for that committee.
Good suggestion. Thank you, Director Stone. So I have Directors McGonigal, Wilson, and Marsh.
Thank you. I'm glad this has been referred during budget discussions, and even prior, there's been an interest at reviewing, having a look at the regional parkland acquisition, where we have gotten to from its initiation, and what may need to be tweaked moving forward, identifying accomplishments and perhaps those deficiencies which do reside within that. And one of them that has been brought forward is perhaps the maintenance of some of those acquisitions, and the need for not regional parks per se, but green spaces. People speak about carbon sequestration and those sorts of opportunities within this function. So it's important that this function has been around since 2008, that it be reaffirmed that A, it's a strategy that we agree to within our strategic plan. We want to look at mitigation of climate change, etc. Everyone has a viewpoint on how we can get there. I think this is one tool that we can. I would certainly be interested in the subcommittee as a volunteer, looking forward at how we can move forward with the regional park land acquisition. So if that is needed, I'll put my name there as well.
Thank you. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, this particular subject is very close to my heart. I'm not the eco destroyer that a lot of people think that I am, and I would be more than happy to put myself forward as chair of this committee, because I have committed to funding this over and over again. It's just there are certain aspects that need to be revisited and need to things. So if you're looking for a chairman, put me up there. Thank you.
Thank you for the offer. Next, I have Director Marsh and then Nicholson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to share briefly, North Cowichan just reinstated its Environmental Advisory Committee. We had 33 or 34 applications. We were advertising for 9 people. We ended up choosing 12 because every application was incredible. And I think many of those applications, and they were from around the area, not just North Cowichan, many of those folks might like to sit on this master plan review and certainly have qualifications beyond any of us on the board. So my suggestion would be that the board choose 1 member from the board to chair the committee, and then decide how big we want the committee to be, and then put out an advertisement and have the rest of the membership of the committee be people from the community. And
just a point of clarity, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I think we're looking for directors, not members of the public for this, just the directors to review. If I'm mistaken, please correct me.
Yes, thank you, Director McGowan. I'm not sure, but I think Mr. Carruthers, was that the...
Yeah, my understanding what this would be a subcommittee of the committee. That could be a potential outcome moving forward, is to have a broader outreach into the community. But at this point in time, it's elected officials only.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that, Mr. Carruthers, because I thought select committees included the public. And so before
Mr. Chair, they can, but that wasn't the intent of this particular item. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's what for discussion. Next
Mr. Chair, may I have one follow-up?
Okay, one follow-up.
Could it perhaps then be open to all of us?
I don't know about how best to approach if Mr. Carruthers or...
That is really the will of the committee as to which members sit on the committee.
As
Okay.
it's been formed, don't we decide that?
Yes, I think Director Stone, I see, wants to jump in on this point.
Yeah, I would say that if that's the will of the committee, that it just be Special Regional Services Committee with only 1 agenda item. There's no reason to form a select committee that's a subset of the Regional Services Committee. If it's decided that all members want to take part, or frankly, I was thinking maybe 7, 8, 9 members of the board, but if everybody wants to be part of it, then it should just be a Special Regional Services Committee agenda with only regional parkland review on the agenda. I would contend that that might make it difficult to make progress and bring recommendations back, but that's the will of the committee.
If I can, Mr. Chair, just to clarify my terminology, and my apologies to the committee. A select committee is a select committee of the board. This would be a subcommittee of the Regional Services Committee.
Okay. Why don't we work through the speakers list and come back to the details. Next, I have Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Well, I would like to be involved in whatever is happening, but I guess my confusion is exactly what the purpose of the review is. It's titled as a review of the park acquisition master plan. And when I listened to Director McGonigal, I felt that he was indicating a broader scope. And so I think it's really important that we're all clear on when and where we're going to actually fix on the purpose of the review. And I also would add that I think that we will need probably community help, and welcome Director Marsh's suggestion about opening it up to community members.
Okay, thank you. Director, Mr. Carruthers.
Well, maybe, thank you, Mr. Chair, just to respond to Director Nicholson's question. That's why it comes, the title of it is the Regional Parkland Acquisition Master Plan Review, because that is the document that provides not only you, but staff direction on how we move forward. That document was developed with public input. And I think that would be the most appropriate way of dealing with your future strategy around regional parkland acquisition, is to do it through your master plan. And that master plan can also be established or enhanced to include issues around financing and funding and budgetary issues as well. So I don't know that you could do a review of the regional parkland acquisition master plan without a public component to that. I think the purpose of this subcommittee would be to sit down and discuss how you would do that and what would be the best way of taking that forward into the community. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you. You know, as someone that participated in the initial exercise, this was a very heavily public-oriented process. There were multiple meetings in community halls all across the region, and a lot of what ended up in the master plan was a result of direct public input, democracy, if there isn't a better term. And I think you know, I'd like to know what the ultimate goal is that you know, I think we were given pretty clear instructions when the plan was created as to what path forward that we needed to take. Successive boards of changed various levels of funding to this. I think if we're going to be, you know, reviewing this, ultimately it should either involve public input or be going back to the public, as Mr. Carruthers has said. And given the diverse perspectives on this, you know, I'm far more inclined to go along with the idea of having you know, each elected official that's interested have the opportunity to sit on there, and I would be one, and if it was the whole group, I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Director Smith.
Thank you. I'd also like to volunteer to sit on the review. As has been pointed out many times over the last, I don't know, month or so, this goes back to 2008, and during that time, there was no footnote indicating that in 2020 we would be looking at COVID, and maybe COVID is changing where and how our communities approach recreation. Maybe what we're looking at is a need to increase recreation within our community parks. For example, Centennial Park has ball diamonds, tennis, but maybe there's things that are walkability for people to get there and actually participate in outdoor recreation. So I think that when you look at the master plan of the parkland acquisition, you also have to look at, yes, the ongoing maintenance of those parks, but what are we needing to provide? COVID has brought forward a definite outdoor opportunity for people, but what opportunity are they actually looking for? So 2008 is a long time ago, and I think it's important that when we're looking at this parkland acquisition, we're actually looking at what are people doing for outdoor recreation and what are they looking for? Because I think COVID has definitely changed all of that. So I would be happy to assist and participate on a committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm seeing a lot of overlap in this conversation with also our community parks, because I think it's sometimes hard to distinguish between the regional parks and the community parks. So I think that we need to be really clear moving forward that this is about your regional parkland acquisition in order to kind of contain the conversation, because I can see there being the desire to be some creep into talking about the roles of community parks and that sort of thing, which is fine. And if the board down the road chooses to undertake a broader review so that there's interrelationships between the community parks and the regional parks, that's fine. But I just wanted to be clear that this particular matter was specific to our regional park acquisition.
Thank you. I think Director McGonigal again, and then Director Sebring.
No, I appreciate all the input, and my intent was certainly not just to have it reside within this body. I think it's important that it does go back out to the public once we've established the terms of reference and what we're looking to move forward with within this function. We do need identifiers from the public on what they feel is important now since 2008. There may be identifiers in the democracy that Director Morrison speaks of properties that were not initially identified that have come up as ecological or other opportunities to facilitate within this function. So my intent was certainly not for us to make the total decision, but to at least set the terms of reference before we go out to the public, etc.
Okay, thank you. So I'll come back to Mr. Carruthers for suggestion, but first I'll Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Director McGonigal. That's good clarification. I don't recall, but there's only a couple of people that haven't put their hands up to expressing an interest in being on this subcommittee. It resonates with me that the suggestion of just making this an extension of this committee that we're sitting in here now with a single agenda item rather than a subcommittee, because we all have an interest in this. We're all passionate about this to one degree or another from various different perspectives. I mean, we see that in the funding debate. But this is about more than the funding debate. This is about the plan and the purpose and, you know, what's underlying this entire discussion. And I'd certainly like to be at the table. And frankly, I'd like all my colleagues at the table because I value all your input. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm hearing lots of interest in this and lots of support for the idea of public involvement. So maybe if Mr. Carruthers, I don't know if you have a suggestion as to how to formally structure it and move forward.
I would want to consult with Ms. Legault around the structure. Typically with a subcommittee, you would have a subset of the committee that would go away and meet. You're talking about now potentially having the entire committee. So I don't know if we would formally call it a subcommittee or if we would just convene a special meeting of the Regional Services Committee with this as being the sole item. And I'm seeing Ms. Legault nodding her head and the board chair as well. So that would be my recommendation, is that you leave it with staff. We will organize a special meeting. I will work with our Parks Division to put together an agenda to guide the conversation and to help the committee come up with the terms of reference as to how they would like to move forward with this exercise.
Perfect, thank you. So Director Stone, did you want to move that? Do we need that moved or?
Well, I was, but I saw Director Acton first, but I just have a comment and then I have a motion that I think will move us to where we can, a lot of the conversation I hear again is really good on the subject matter. So once we determine that, I think all of those thoughts can be brought to it. I think my desire for a select committee was just to be more officious. Based on my experience discussing anything related to parks, it can be very protracted discussion. So I thought if there was some keenly interested stakeholders that wanted to do some of the heavier lifting in a smaller group, but I'm hearing that all members are keenly interested. So I will make a motion, but I would go to those who have something else to say first.
Yeah, sorry, did I miss Director Acton?
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think I'm the only one taking this perspective, but after a lot of the comments over the last few meetings on the parkland acquisition, some comments like future elections coming up and the whole funding thing, and it has somehow turned political, this topic, and I think I don't even think we should be part of the conversation right now. I would much rather see staff come forward with what would be, what's happening. We know what's happening right now in other regional districts, and we know what's happening with Parkland. We know there's a logical progression as to how it should evolve. And I think we're getting, it's becoming political is the only word that I can use here. And it's a forum for speeches, and we're not actually putting our community's best interests in mind. So I'm going to vote against any kind of us coming up with the terms of reference. And I just don't think we've really displayed that it's our lane at the moment. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your perspective, Director Acton. Director Marsh.
I think it makes sense, and it is in a part of our job to come up with the terms of reference. But I still maintain that we should go out to the public for the main membership, because we all have, as Director Acton has eloquently described, we've all made our positions known. So, in that way, it is going to be political if it's just all of us. And I think that we need to get a read of the community, and perhaps someone from the community from each municipality and each area could sit on it. I don't know, but I think if we have that initial meeting with Mr. Crothers, hear what staff have to say, maybe then we'll come to the next step a little bit more assuredly in a way that we can all agree on.
Thank you, Director Kuhn.
I'm in favor of just having a separate meeting with all of us, and to the people that just expressed their opinion, saying that, well, we would be more efficient if we had a smaller group. I say this: if we don't deal with this on a political basis in a large group, then if a small group comes up with a recommendation, we'll be hacking it out at the big group again anyway. So we might as well do it right from the beginning with all of us and get it off. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think I'll return to Director Stone for a recommendation, please.
I would move that a special regional services committee meeting be arranged by staff to discuss the regional parkland acquisition. I'll just make sure I get the wording right here. Regional parkland acquisition master plan, and that meeting be scheduled for a day without other meetings scheduled.
Thank you. That a second, Director Wilson? Seconded, okay. Any further discussion on that before I call the question?
If I just can make a quick point, all of the stuff that I'm hearing discussed can be discussed at that meeting. And then if the board or committee recommends to the board that, a public process be initiated, I will only comment that I'm not sure that was in anyone's work plan, that kind of level of community engagement, but that'll be up to the committee to determine when that discussion takes place.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you. And I'm sure I've got one somewhere in amongst all of my books and reports and stuff, but perhaps we could ask staff to send a digital copy of the current master plan around to all of us in advance, so that we're not trying to digest it just in advance of the meeting, and then we can take with what staff brings us to the meeting. We will have all had a chance to have read it. Thank you.
Thank you. And it is also online. I checked. Mr. Crothers.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to further what Director Morrison just said. I'd already given instructions to staff to do that and would encourage the directors to all read the acquisition strategy before we meet, just so that there's context and people are prepared.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so calling the question, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Okay, is that Director Acting? Opposed. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we now move to Ms. Legault.
There's no new business or unfinished business, so it'd be a question period, and I'm assuming a 10-minute recess.
Yeah, 10-minute recess. We'll return at 11:55, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I was anticipating we would have lunch between noon and 1, so I have a half an hour appointment at noon. So no sense me coming back
Okay, that's fine.
after that.
Director Marsh.
What time?
11:55. Director Nicholson.
I also have to nip down to the office and sign a letter that has a time.
The camera, nope, sorry. Now we're live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Any questions, Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've received one submission for question period. There are not actually any questions in it, so it is contrary to the board policy on question period. So I will just acknowledge that we've received it and distribute it by email to the board for consideration.
Okay, thank you for doing that. So with no further questions, we have no closed session, correct?
Correct.
And motion to adjourn. Moved to second. Everyone, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you all at 1:30.
See you at
Great
1:30.
job, Mr.
Good,
Chair.
yeah, good job, Blaze. Well done.
Thanks for the help.